It was, I think, highlighted that only 12% of the American population does not have a metabolic disorder. Okay, that's dysregulated blood sugar. These are inflammatory markers. And so the fear around getting a viral infection, right? And then having this cytokine storm and being in the hospital, it really shined the light. We have an immune system and we can handle a virus, but we've got to be healthy enough to do so, and we can't have these other things in the way. So I think that should help motivate people to look a little bit more about those markers that you talked about, those, biorhythms, our sleep. Look, I lecture on this stuff. I wrote a book on hormone disruptors and all of that stuff. I was still using Listerine because I just like the way it cleans my palate. But that is a toxin that I'm putting in my body. It just is, right? And there are other alternatives that can get that same effect. So we can always do better at decreasing exposure, taking control over what we do have control over. So important.
Welcome to Are You Satisfied? A podcast that explores what a deeply satisfying and fulfilling life looks like and how to live it. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Murphy, award-winning naturopathic doctor. Hey everybody, today on the show I have another naturopathic doctor because I love naturopathic doctors. They're wonderful. This is a special one. Her name is Dr. Holly Lucille. She's a nationally recognized and longtime naturopathic doctor, educator, natural products consultant, and television and radio host. She's authored several books and also has her own podcast called Mindful Medicine. She's had many media appearances and lectured extensively around the world. Dr. Lucille believes in the science, art, and mystery of healing and has a heartfelt passion for the individual wellness of all people. Okay, welcome to the show, Holly. It's been a long time in scheduling this podcast, so I'm so happy you're here.
Me too.
And excited to hear what you have to share. So the podcast is called Are You Satisfied? And we're particularly interested in, of course, exploring like the foundations of living a healthy life, because I do believe, we need our health. That's essential so that we have a healthy vehicle to live in. But life is more than that too. So interested to hear, what you think about, how to live a very holistic life beyond just the physical things. So you've been working a long time in naturopathic medicine, seeing patients here in Los Angeles. What do you see with patients in terms of what, keeps them healthy or makes them sick, and what are the keys?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think for the most part, it's, this is an inside job. I've always been resistant to thinking like I'm a healer or even that I'm treating somebody. I'm basically working with somebody. But to tell you the truth, this is being healthy and wanting to change. And especially when you're talking about health and the foundations of health, right, that are modifiable usually, it's an inside job. So I really need that partner in order to work. And I see with people who, one, really look at my paperwork, fill it out, to its greatest extent. They tell me about how I can help them best. They understand what our deal is as far as like payments, and like they're just leaning in. They're ready to work. That is what I've seen in my practice, where most people grab a hold of that, they're ready to lean in, make the changes. I always say that there's a difference between, I would say, compliance, right? So compliance is like, yeah, she told me to do this. Adherence is more sticky. It's like a faithful attachment to something. And that's always what I'm going for people. And I tell them, I'm like, how can I make our work more adherent to you? Like if we're talking about, because Sarah, you and I both know that consuming this style of medicine, okay, naturopathic, functional, integrative, more holistic, is difficult, right? Here, take this from my parents being both pharmacists, is super easy medicine. You basically get a prescription, probably pay a copay. You don't even have to go to the pharmacy these days. They can deliver it. You take off that top, take your medication. That's your healthcare. But when we are looking at the healing from the inside out, the therapeutic order, being able to identify and treat the cause and using the least invasive methods to do so, then we're looking at sometimes dietary interventions, right? Not really easy for a lot of people because food is a love language and it means so much in our society. Lifestyle modalities, change sleep habits, right? Targeted evidence-based nutritional supplements or botanical supplements with the correct dosage, sometimes taken throughout the day. It's not easy. So I try to help people understand that. And so they stop looking for that silver bullet, even in this space, and that we can really dig in and work. And that's where I've seen people have best outcomes when working with somebody like me.
I love it. I totally agree. I mean, it is, the body heals itself, and the patient is the biggest factor, and we can guide them to healthy nutrition and lifestyle habits and different supplements or medicines to take, but the patient's got to do it. And
yeah.
And also, you had mentioned the adherence thing. I love that. The idea of being really engaged and believing and wanting to participate rather than, I got to do this because she told me to. Oh.
Yeah. And I think, though, that's where our principles really come in. Like docere, right? In Latin means doctor. It's to teach. And I think that, to facilitate, I don't want to just teach. I want to facilitate understanding. I want to put the dots close together so that my patients can connect them by themselves and then own them, right? They know that it's not just, this quote unquote treatment plan. It's like, I know why I came to see her. I know what my end goal is. I know and I trust that she's going to help me get there. And these are the steps I'm going to have to take. It's those I statements that I don't want anybody to say like, yeah, she told me to do that. It's like, I can recommend things. And that's why I've always kind of pushed back around doctor's orders, right? I always say, these are my recommendations based on my knowledge, based on my experience, based on my education, based on what you have shared with me. These are my recommendations. And I need you to pick them up from there, right? Because of this therapeutic relationship that we're developing, hopefully, and then carry them across the goal line.
I love it. I love it. And also, I feel like there's, and you can probably relate in this experience, is that there's a life coaching kind of aspect to what we do sometimes. So, because we get to know our patients so well, and yes, our intake forms are longer than any other doctors, probably, people have told me, that, I'm very interested in the intersection of how other aspects of our life affect our health and well-being and happiness. So our relationships or our career or where we're living, our environment, what we're doing. What do you think about that with your patients? Have you seen that where sometimes they're just sick because of a bad marriage or something? Countless
times. Because, once again, the way that I have been able to continue to practice with integrity and with joy, actually, and with hope is following my principles. And when you think about, you said it, the body has this innate ability to heal. What are the obstacles to cure? I'll give you this one example that has come to my mind just from you asking me this question. I had this woman, postmenopausal, struggling with libido. And we kind of did everything. I
think I know where this is going.
And so I asked one more question, and sometimes these questions just come when you're like, and I'm like, I finally was just like, how do you feel about your husband? And the waterworks just started, and she couldn't stand her husband. She could not stand her husband for years. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I got nothing. Yeah. There is no supplement for that. But it led us down this place where we were able to just talk about that fact and that is an obstacle to cure when we were talking about that particular clinical presentation. I've seen it before so many times. When you look up the word diet in the dictionary, it actually means habitual nourishment. Like, how as a habit do you nourish yourself? Sometimes, because we know that diet is so foundational to our health, right? Where I have, because of my education, because of my experience, I can pretty much write down a therapeutic diet for almost any clinical condition at this point in time. But if somebody doesn't feel worthy of being nourished, if they have self-confidence issues, if they have a saboteur that is still running their lives, then that is not going to be for anything. And where we have to back up and go to is that obstacle to cure, which is that you don't feel worthy of taking the time to do food prep or having the resources or creating the resources to have a food whatever is going to help you get this piece down. it's not there for you. So we need to go there first. And so that's kind of how I've always worked. It's like, what are the obstacles to cure? And like you said, they could be many. It could be a toxic carpet in your house,
Right.
It could be mold that is there, but you don't realize how much that you've been exposed to it. And now these little mycotoxins are living in so that relationship with people, with your environment, with work, with your vocation, with yourself, it all is so important.
Yeah, that's a pretty big, work in America, I feel like is a pretty big obstacle because our, American culture is to work hard and overwork, and work is everything. And so I see that a lot too, where we need to coach people how to balance with, other, like it's not everything, right?
I had had a very established practice for over 20 years. And then the last couple of years I had taken a job, a W-2 job, and had just winded out of that. And I'm back to clinical practice. And so when I was creating my intake form this time, I actually lean in a little bit more to somebody's vocation. And, I asked them, like, how do you feel about it? Are you happy there? Do you like what you do? Do you like who you do it with? Like, it was so fun to have the wisdom of the past where I could really write up a intake form that elicited these little things that I used to have to dig for or that I would maybe forget. So it's right there. And I also get my patients thinking, because I don't think they've ever seen an intake form like mine. And I'm sure they're like, wait, what?
Right.
But I'm like, no, this is going to be helpful. Yeah.
Wonderful. Now, there's a couple things that I think people may or may not know about you. And one of them I really want to talk to you about, and it's part of why I thought of you for this podcast, is because, beyond your doctor day job, I think at night you are a singer, musician in a band. Is this correct?
Yeah, that is correct. My nickname is Doc Star. Just kidding. Okay. But yeah, it was interesting. So I've played the guitar. I remember buying my first guitar. It was with, what were those grocery stamps, like green stamps? You probably are too young to know, but we used to you'd go to the grocery store, right? And then you'd get stamps for as much as you purchase or something like that. Okay. And I was all over them, and I'd collect them, and then I'd have a little catalog, and for 78 green stamps, I bought this little plastic guitar, and I was always fascinated with it. And then my neighbors in the back, they were probably a decade older than I. They were my babysitters, but they both played guitar. And so for $2 a half hour, I think I was learning Beatles songs and Neil Young, and it was thrilled. So I played guitar for all of my life. And then I was in a situation where my wife, who I met her as a touring singer-songwriter, and that part of her life kind of came to a halt. And she fired her manager, her band went away, and then I said to her, if you ever need, she was partnering up with somebody else. She's like, if you ever need somebody just to play guitar and you can get outside, and just be at the mic, let me know. And they'll come to next rehearsal. And so the guy she was playing with says, here, why don't you play this? And it was the bass. And I was like, 2 less strings sounds good to me. I'd never played the bass before, never was interested in the bass. I always should have been a bass player. So I've been playing bass for the last decade. And it was actually during the pandemic where somebody had asked Julie, my wife, to play it was a distanced yard party, like a distant, we set up, and I just accompanied her on some things. And then we just started to pull together songs from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and today's, and some originals. And we opened up at the Kibitz Room for another band, and the owner of the Kibitz Room saw us and gave us a residency. So we play at the Kibitz Room every third Friday night of the month. And so it's super fun.
I love it. And do your patients know about this secret nightlife you have?
I hope. I don't know. But it's so fun to get creative and spend time, because we rehearse, and Julie's a prolific songwriter. You couldn't pay me to write a song. It'd take me 7 years, but she's one of those people that gets it downloaded. It's all of a sudden a song is there.
Yeah.
And then me coming up with the bass lines and just spending that time creatively and together as a couple too, doing something that's really productive. And it's just been super fun. And We're just at that place where we have a photo shoot now kind of scheduled, and then we're going to have a landing page for a website, and we've got an Instagram. And so, but we played like, I should have told you, the Malibu, the vineyard out there. What is that? Winery right on the Pacific Coast.
Rosenthal.
We played Rosenthal over the past summer, and we've gotten all these other gigs now. And so it was just like this little thing that turned into just something that's going to be sustainable. So I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. It sounds so fun. I've been thinking about taking up DJing for fun.
Love it.
And I talked about it on Saturday night. I was out, and there's a woman there that does events. She's like, "Great, you want to do my party?" So I've already booked my gig, but I don't know how to DJ yet.
That's the way to go. You know what? Sometimes I think that's the best. You don't have any excuses right now. You've got your gig booked. Now you have to learn. I love it. I love it.
It's so funny. What else do you and Julie like to do for fun and creative, expression? Any
well, I'm not going to lie. Netflix and the couch is part of it.
Yep.
I would say that.
Yeah, there's some inspiring Netflix shows. Some TV is not inspiring, but there's some good stuff on there.
No, well, now that you've got the creativity of like all these different streaming things where you can get into documentaries and learn stuff, like I really like that. We kind of divide and conquer. I live now right under the Hollywood sign in Beechwood Canyon, and I grew a garden and raised garden beds. And for the first 2 weeks, I figured out that I was just a feeding trough for the ground squirrels and the rabbits. And so I had to enclose because I was like, I really want to garden and have it be sustainable. And I love feeding animals and such, but I really wanted. So I garden quite a bit and have been learning by mistakes for sure, which has been the best way. Because, at first I had some books and things and I was like, I'm just going to do this. Same thing, like I'm composting now. And there's home composting. There's all sorts of different ways to compost, but I have my whole new compost thing. So I love fussing outside. I like projects. I like building things. I like using my hands. I love cooking. And then she loves doing the dishes. So it all works out.
That's perfect.
It all works out.
And this may or may not be off topic, but I just love this question in general, so I guess I'll ask it. Tell me the meeting story between you and Julie. Was it, I love the little romance story of, how did it happen? I want to hear the meeting story between you and Julie and how it all began, because it's fun.
Well, I tell you what, the real long version, you and I will talk about over a glass of wine sometime.
Wonderful. Okay.
But I will tell you this part to everybody is that it was really through music. She was a friend of mine who came over, and we're going to head out in the town that night. I lived in West Hollywood at the time. And she saw that I had a bunch of guitars. And we just started talking, and our animation, for example, and this I think is important, the friend that came over with her, I was a little underwhelmed with that friendship. Just not a lot of, it was a new friendship. And with Julie, the animation was just there. The energy, the connection, the ease, the fun, the laughter. And so for 4 months, we were friends before anything happened and I was just enjoying that. And I thought, she's just a better friend. Well, then we stopped kidding ourselves and got on with things. And we just celebrated our 15-year anniversary.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
And I love the idea of paying attention to the energy of situations in our lives and how we feel and leaning in or maybe backing out depending on, I think sometimes we disregard that intuition or the energy of how things feel. And it's, to me, key and fundamental.
Yeah, well, I think it goes right in with your podcast as far as, are you satisfied? Because, for example, I was at this job that I'm not going to mention, but I'm too old, I think, anymore for myself to come home and go, oh, this job is a joke. I'm not being utilized. Nobody really respects my mind. And I couldn't live that way. And so to come back and establish my practice again and really get the opportunity to care for people, it was just I needed to listen to myself. And, it's that I've mentioned the saboteur, and I think that I've gotten this language from Carolyn Mace, the medical intuitive and an author and prolific speaker and all of that. But The other archetype that I think that I've outgrown or at least healed is that prostitute, like, oh yeah, it was a job and it was a salary and it was unlimited time off and it was easy peasy and I didn't have to work very hard but to stay and take the money and run and would have been an active prostitute in myself, because it was going against everything that I felt. It just wasn't satisfying to me. And I knew that I had a different part of my life and my brain and my mind that I could reach again and be satisfied. And that's really leaning in and helping people. And I just didn't have the opportunity there. So it's definitely something that's so important, as you said, just and believe me, there's been plenty of times in the past where I'm like, no, are you kidding? I'm leaving. There's money and it's easy.
Right.
Bye. The younger self, right? The less discerning self, the less wise self. So.
Yeah, but life is short. So the most precious resource is our time and energy, right?
Truly. Yeah.
And
so I'm so happy to be sitting here with you right now.
I know, it's great. Part of this podcast is a good reason for me to reach out to, people that I enjoy and are inspired by, and I get to talk to them.
I know. And I think this is the funny thing.
Well.
If I was thinking about you and I'd be like, oh, I wonder how Dr. Sarah Murphy is doing. But then I see, I'm just thinking about this right now. I've never really formulated the sentence, but then I see maybe a post from you on social media. And I wonder, does that satisfy then my curiosity about, hey, how are you doing? Right?
Right.
It's so superficial. And maybe without it, I would have picked up the phone and said, hey, I was just thinking about you the other day. I wanted to check in and see how you were. So it's an interesting thing about social media in that way, where you feel like you're getting satisfied with following people who you love and care for, but maybe that's not the case.
Yeah, I agree, because it does give you some connection and a little bit of an update. My dog Prince, the love of my life, who you haven't met in person, but you're familiar with him through social media. But yeah, I guess it's a part of the story and not the whole story of who we are and how we're doing, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Well, so you have another story recently that's very personal, and let's talk about that. I know you're just sharing with me about it just before this podcast. And because we haven't been in touch through the pandemic, I was not aware of what you were going through. But it was pretty serious with a breast cancer diagnosis. So, let's talk about that.
Yeah. It was interesting. I used to run pretty hard. I think I probably adopted the motto, I'll sleep when I die, type of stuff. And for years and years and years, you probably know, I was traveling pretty much around the world, lecturing and really having fun. But as I could think back right now, sort of what I would say, trampling my terrain, right? So when you think about oncology care at this point in time, and for the last 70 years, it's very tumor-centric, right? We focus on the tumor. And what's really important is to understand the terrain or the soil in which you got sick, because you can't heal, right, in the same soil in which you got sick. You've got to make some adjustments. And so I know that even though, so many parts of my life I had dialed in, right, because of my education and because of wanting to do, walk my talk and such, but there are some blind spots that I had. But anyway, I was in my infrared sauna. It was 2020. Early, and I had a bentonite clay mask on, right? So my face, my neck, my chest, and I was just kind of swirling around the clay, and I was like, what's that? And I noted a lump. And I've always had small, fibrocystic breasts. When I would get a mammogram, you'd always get the letter back. You seem to be clear, but you probably want to go get an ultrasound because you have fibro. So I'm thinking, is this just exacerbated or... Well, 5 days later, I did have an appointment with my gynecologist who did a breast exam and ran over the same lump. And she's like, you know what, we need to get it assessed. And so, sure enough, after I got it assessed, but then one original doctor said it wasn't anything. And I think I knew better. I drove away from that appointment and we were both so excited that I didn't have breast cancer. But I would lift my arm and it would dimple and all these things that I knew and heard. And I never had very many oncology patients in my prior practice, because when I started to practice, there was a law in California that unless you were an oncologist, you couldn't treat people with cancer. And so I just knew enough where I was like, I need a second opinion. And so I went to Bedford Breast Center, got a second opinion. An incredible doctor, Dr. Heather Richardson, did a biopsy that day, and she called me the next day. And she said, you have intra and outer ductal breast cancer, and I want you to get an MRI. And so I did that. And then, we had a tailored discussion, and I basically said, if I were your sister, and she said, how do you feel about your breasts? And I said, and she's like, I would get a double mastectomy. So that's what happened.
That's, the short story.
That's the short story. Yes.
And any lessons in that for you? I know it's kind of affected where you're going now with your practice. So
one of the appointments with this whole scenario of having been diagnosed with breast cancer, one of the appointments that I was too afraid not to go to was a conventional oncologist. Because there's this whole idea out there. There's like, it's the C word, right? And there's even that hashtag F cancer. And, it's like this, cancer just means crap, right? It just means crap. It's basically, we can put it that way. And I know that there's been a lot of promises from many, many years to we're going to cure cancer. I think our goal is, cancer is along for the ride. We live with it. It lives with us. It's to prevent cancer. And I think trying to cure cancer is a waste of time. It's a waste of money. It's not going to happen. And so that deeper understanding, and then as well, thank you for asking, but my experience with my conventional oncologist was so underwhelming. They did not ask me anything about who I was, about my diet, about anything. It was just looking at my pathology and standard of care. Here, I want you to take this medication. And if you have too many side effects from that medication, we can switch you to another one. I'll see you in 6 months. And that's it. That's it. That was it. That was it. And I was just like, oh no. So I took it upon myself to see an integrative oncologist, right? So somebody who is more terrain centric. And I leaned in and did monthly lab work for the first 6 months. Now I do every 3 months lab work. I have changed my diet completely. I have changed my lifestyle completely. Not completely, but I've made some significant changes to make sure, because the number one risk factor for getting cancer is already having had cancer. So I'm at the top of the risk, right? And so, even though I feel cancer-free and the surgery is successful, there's still a risk for me, and I need to pay attention to that. And so I also noted that there's a population out there that I think is underserved, and there are evidence-based therapeutic interventions, dietary especially, that we can do to help people in this population. And that's where I'm headed with my education at this point in time, and also my practice.
I love it. I think that's definitely a big need. I mean, cancer is on the rise, as are many chronic illnesses for us.
Isn't that crazy?
And in conventional medicine, after your chemo and surgery and radiation, there isn't really any counseling on how to prevent or the recurrence, right? When that's a big risk. Like, do they give any counseling on how you're not going to get it again?
No, because that secondary metastasis is always more treatment resistant, and it's usually what takes people down. And a high percentage of people that have been diagnosed with cancer will always have that secondary metastasis or that secondary tumor. And so no, absolutely not. No, not from my experience. Nothing was mentioned or talked about or encouraged. It was just, here, take this. And I was used to that from growing up, and I knew it wasn't right.
And no nutrition or lifestyle or stress reduction counseling?
No, in fact, some of the 501c3 established cancer societies, their recommendations are full of crap and sugar and things that will ultimately do harm to an oncology patient, for sure.
Yeah,
it's crazy town.
It's pretty shocking. My mom is going through breast cancer right now, and I'm going to keep my emotions calm right now, but I was on the phone hearing how at the chemo room they serve Coca-Cola, Pepsi, or Sprite, or orange juice, and like Cheez-Its and Ritz crackers to these patients that are dying of cancer. And I lost my my cool
Yeah.
because it's insanity. Like that doesn't make any sense to me or you. And I don't even know, like to me, it's kind of criminal, honestly,
Truly.
to
What
be,
about Boost or Ensure? What's the first ingredient, or maybe the second ingredient?
Terrible.
It's sugar. To fulfill the calories, it's sugar. There's synthetic nutrients that are going to do harm. There's sugar that's going to do a lot of harm because cancer is a metabolic disease. And it's just, like I said, I think for 70 years, we have not, with standard of care oncology, moved the needle at all as far as outcomes are concerned. And it's devastating to families, to individuals, finances, resources, relationships, and lives. And so I know we can do better. And listen, we have the education and the skills to do so. So I felt like I have an opportunity to really lean in and help people again. So
Yay.
Yeah.
So now you're in your practice treating cancers and specifically breast cancer?
I'm actually honing, so I think it's the 3P, right? So it's the patient. Yes, I have been. A practitioner, I am. Passionate, all right? But so right now I am setting up my practice, but I'm finishing my education in some really tailored courses for the metabolic approach to cancer through Dr. Nasha Winters, and then also the Oncology Nutrition Institute to be a certified oncology nutrition consultant. So I'll be tying up those things in the next 4 months, but learning a lot along the way, and then just being thrilled to have an opportunity to give back and support this population.
Wonderful. Yeah, we need it. I'm appalled that there's still doctors in 2022 that say, oh, food, nutrition doesn't matter and has nothing to do with your condition. Like that to me is crazy.
And that is just a strong opinion because we from an evidence-based perspective, we can defy that statement up and down,
easy,
back and forth,
no problem,
sideways,
yeah.
Easy. It's just, that's ignorance. That's just ignorance or an attitude.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
I agree. So anything else in regards to, so we do know that probably 80% plus of chronic illness in America is preventable through, if we were to live in a healthier manner, right? Lifestyle, nutrition, cleaning up our environment, reducing the pollutants that we're exposing ourselves to, decreasing the stress that we put ourselves under mentally, emotionally, all of this. Any other kind of keys or things you think are really important to living a fulfilling life?
Yeah, just think about the pandemic that I think, are moving out of, maybe not quite yet, but have been through in the last 2 years. It was, I think, highlighted that only 12% of the American population does not have a metabolic disorder. Okay, that's dysregulated blood sugar. These are inflammatory markers. And so the fear around getting a viral infection, right? And then having this cytokine storm and being in the hospital on a respirator. It really shined the light on, look, we have an immune system and we can handle a virus, but we've got to be healthy enough to do so, and we can't have these other things in the way. So I think in and of itself, that should help motivate people to look a little bit more about those markers that you talked about, those, biorhythms, our sleep. I lecture on this stuff. I wrote a book on hormone disruptors and all of that stuff. I was still using Listerine because I just like the way it cleans my palate. But that is a toxin that I'm putting in my body. It just is, right? And there are other alternatives that can get that same effect. So I would say like 80% of my environment was cleaned up, but I even leaned in and I was like, I can't believe it. I got to get rid of that. I got to find swaps for that. So we can always do better at decreasing exposure, taking control over what we do have control over. So important. Yeah.
And also not getting overwhelmed by the things that we don't necessarily have control over. Because I see that in myself sometimes and with patients where, it's a tough world out there, and we got a lot of, social problems and environmental problems that, being exposed to toxins is unavoidable, really. But just remembering, do what we can do and don't worry or stress
Great.
about the rest too much, because that's not healthy either. So at some point we just got to like chill out and also, enjoy the time we have
100%.
here, right?
I think that is a really good point because, especially somebody like me who might have been diagnosed with a chronic or with a potentially chronic illness or a severe illness or scary illness, you can almost get a little bit consumed with it and then scared about it. And I had to come into my own realization of how scary that was for me, and sometimes still is. When you're not far enough away from the initial diagnosis, so it's just you don't have that 20-year survival, free of it was still so brand new, and it still is to me sometimes. But I think being able to relax around that, having fun, making sure that you having connection, being out in nature, all of those things I think are really important to just that balance, And when you said, I know we are here in the United States, work hard. But the other than I think thing that I, as a Midwesterner, originally used to be proud of, work hard, play hard. The play hard gets us in trouble sometimes.
Yeah.
What we do to come down from the intense work, right, can actually be kind of harmful, even though it's relaxing and fun.
Yeah. So moderation always.
Yes.
So what's next for you? Any other exciting things? I know your practice is evolving, and I mean, I got to come hear your band now some night. That'll be fun.
Yeah, that'd be great. Especially if we're out in Malibu anytime, I'll let you know about it. I had a birthday in January and I earmarked something in July, which I'm really excited about. One of my best friends, Dr. Tori Hudson, and I had explored Mount Hood together backpacking. And there's this little place called Elk Cove. And I am going to go up to Elk Cove. We're going to fly in and rent a car and head to Mount Hood and spend the night in a resort, and then hit the trailhead early in the morning and spend 4 nights up on Mount Hood in the summertime. And it's so, this I have to say, when I've gone to extensive backpacking trips before, I always have joked, I'm there's my circadian rhythm, right? It's that diurnal variation where it's you go to sleep naturally and you wake up naturally, and there's this thing that just kicks in, and that's happened to me where I'm
yes,
you're away from artificial lights, you're away from EMFs for the most part, you're into this rhythm again, that rhythm, and I am so excited for that. So that's coming up, and obviously we haven't been able to be mobile and move around as much and travel, so I'll be looking forward to that, to tell you the truth, for a lot of different reasons.
Magical. Nature is wonderful, and to connect at that level, yes.
Truly.
So, Holly, if people want to connect with you further or stay in touch with you, where can they go to find out about your work and be in touch with you?
Yeah, so because I'm in a transition, I basically tried to scrub the internet so nobody can find me. I'm the opposite of what everybody else is trying to do. Did
it work? Is that even possible?
I got pretty close. And until I can, because in my prior practice, and still I love, I have always felt when we really grok our principles, there was any clinical presentation that could come in, we could apply our principles, our thinking process, the therapeutic order, and we can help people, period. But for a while, I was sort of needing to be everything to everybody, right? So, and I always felt proud of never specializing in just being a good naturopathic doctor. But who can keep up these days, right? So I wanted to
Correct.
be able to. So you can always, my email would be best if somebody wants to get a hold of me. I'm pretty responsive. And that's just Dr. Holly at drhollylucille.com, and that's DR. And I have a website placeholder, but it's just been scrubbed and doesn't really make a lot of sense any further. But that's about it. And then once I'm up and running and feel confident, then it really will still be a very niche boutique by referral only. Because listen, in a time like this, in a place like this, I want people who really want to work and lean in and be my partner and I can be their partner and I can help care for them. And so it's just not for everybody.
I love it. That's the only way. That's correct.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Holly. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening to the Are You Satisfied podcast. Links for any mentions from this episode are available in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with me, go to drsarahmurphy.com. That's drsarahmurphy.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. Definitely tell all your friends about it and leave a review. See you next week.